They say real love is quiet. Soft laughter over burnt toast, hands brushing while passing coffee, the silence between two people who no longer need words. That's what I thought Daniel and I had. Our house sat on the edge of Seattle, surrounded by mist and cedar trees that seemed to whisper when the wind came through. Every morning he'd hum while grinding coffee beans, the sound steady and comforting. I'd watch him, thinking how lucky I was. He wasn't the kind of man who demanded space. He filled it instead, and with warmth, with calm. Even his silences used to feel safe, until they didn't. One evening, as the rain traced lines down the kitchen window, I caught him standing by the hallway, head tilted slightly, listening. "What is it?" I asked, drying my hands. He smiled faintly. "Nothing. Thought I heard something." "What kind of something?" He paused, just long enough to make me uneasy. Just the house settling. But later that night, when I woke to the sound of faint humming downstairs, that same smile flickered in my mind. Daniel said our home had history. He'd bought it years before we met, restored every inch himself. "It's strong," he'd said, running his hand along the banister. "This place has a good heart." I'd believed him. Still, there were moments, a small passing, when I felt the walls listening, when his eyes would shift, following some invisible rhythm I couldn't hear. In the mornings, the world would reset. He'd kiss my forehead, pour my coffee, and everything would seem normal again. But beneath that perfect rhythm, something pulsed. A quiet that wasn't peace but warning. And sometimes, when he thought I wasn't watching, Daniel would glance toward the locked basement door. The one he never opened. The basement door had always been part of the house. Silent, unassuming, painted the same soft gray as the walls. But after that first night of humming, it began to stand out as if it were the only thing that didn't belong. I asked Daniel about it over breakfast. "What's really down there?" I tried to make it sound casual, stirring sugar into my coffee. He didn't look up from his plate. "Just storage. It's unfinished and unsafe, loose wiring, exposed nails. You shouldn't go down there." "Then why do you lock it?" He smiled then, the kind of smile meant to end a conversation, not start one. "Because I know you, Emma. You'd go exploring, and I'd rather not find you with a broken ankle." It was playful enough that I laughed. But something about his tone clung to me all day. That night, as rain hit the windows again, I couldn't sleep. Daniel had gone downstairs after dinner to fix something, and an hour passed before I heard faint murmurs drifting through the floorboards. The sound was rhythmic, low, almost tender, a whisper meant for someone else. I pressed my ear against the cool wood. Words blurred together, fragments of apologies, maybe prayers. Then a sharp thud, like something dropped or pushed. My pulse thudded to match. When he came back up, I was pretending to read on the couch. "Everything okay?" I asked, eyes on the page. He looked startled, then softened. "Of course. Just tightening a few pipes." "Pipes don't whisper," I wanted to say, but I only nodded. Later, lying beside him, I watched the slow rise and fall of his chest. He looked peaceful, harmless even. I told myself every marriage had secrets. Small ones, harmless ones, and maybe this was his. Still, when the wind howled outside and the house creaked in response, I couldn't help glancing toward the hallway. The basement door waited there in the dark, locked and quiet, but somehow listening back. And the next morning, when Daniel handed me my coffee with that same easy smile, I noticed the faintest smudge of dirt beneath his nails. It started as something faint, a whisper of rot mixed with damp wood. At first I thought maybe something had spoiled in the fridge, but by the third morning the smell had deepened, thick and metallic, curling around the edges of the kitchen like smoke that refused to leave. "Do you smell that?" I asked Daniel as he poured his coffee. He sniffed once and shrugged. "Old pipes. The house settles in strange ways when it rains." "It's not the pipes," I said. "It smells like—" "Emma." His voice cut sharp enough to stop me. Then softer, "Please don't start worrying about every little thing. You know how your imagination runs." The way he said your imagination felt like a warning dressed as affection. I nodded, though the scent burned the back of my throat. When my friend Claire dropped by that afternoon, she noticed it immediately. "God, what's that smell? Something die in the walls?" she joked. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I told you the plumbing's old," he said before I could answer. Claire's smile faltered. She left early that night. I couldn't shake her words. I kept replaying the way Daniel's hand gripped his mug too tightly, how his eyes lingered on her as she walked out the door. After midnight, I drifted into a restless sleep and dreamed of water dripping, steady, endless. In the dream, I stood barefoot in the kitchen as crimson drops pooled between the tiles. Then a scraping sound began, slow and deliberate, like metal against concrete. I woke with a jolt. The sound was real this time, faint but unmistakable, echoing from beneath the floorboards. My breath caught. I pressed my palm to the cool wood, feeling the faintest vibration, as if something, or someone, was moving below. Daniel stirred beside me. "Emma, what are you doing?" "There's something down there," I whispered. He sighed, pulling me back toward him. "You're dreaming again?" But even as he held me close, I could still hear it, that slow, patient scraping from the basement, just beneath our feet. The smell beneath the floorboards had faded, but not forgotten. It lingered in the corners of my mind, like something waiting to be remembered. To distract myself, I decided to clean Daniel's study while he was at work. He hated anyone touching his things, but I needed the normalcy of dusting, folding, organizing. Maybe if I made everything neat, the unease in my chest would quiet too. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old books. His desk was neat, too neat, except for one drawer that didn't close fully. Inside were letters, bills, and a stack of photographs curled at the edges. I shuffled through them absently, smiling at a few from our wedding, until one caught my eye. It was torn, the bottom half missing, and one side looked burned. The image showed a woman standing in front of what looked like our house before the renovations. Her eyes were soft, familiar somehow, her hair dark, her smile hesitant. I turned it over. The back was smudged, but a name was faintly visible in ink: Lena. Before I could process it, the front door opened. Daniel's footsteps echoed through the hall. My hands froze around the photo. He appeared in the doorway, smiling. "Cleaning?" "Just organizing a bit," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Who's this?" I held the photo up. He stared for a long moment, too long. Then his face smoothed into calm. "Someone from my past. Nothing worth remembering." "Your past?" I pressed. He stepped closer, gently taking the picture from me. "Old memories don't do anyone good, Emma." His voice was soft but final. That night, I couldn't sleep. The name Lena looped through my head, fitting into the shape of all the small things I hadn't wanted to see. The locked door, the whispers, the dirt beneath his nails. When Daniel reached for me in the dark, I pretended to sleep. His hand lingered against my back, still, too still, as if listening. And somewhere below us, in the quiet bones of the house, I swore I heard that same name breathe through the walls. For days after finding the photo, I couldn't look at Daniel without feeling a quiet dread coil beneath my ribs. I told myself it was exhaustion, that grief and paranoia had crept into my mind after too many sleepless nights. But the house disagreed. It began speaking again, in sounds I couldn't quite name. That night the air was heavy, the kind that pressed against your chest. I lay awake listening to Daniel's breathing, steady beside me. Then faintly I heard it, a sound too soft to be the wind, too human to ignore. Crying. It came from downstairs, muffled and broken, a woman's sob that seemed to tremble through the floor. I sat up slowly, pulse hammering in my ears. "Daniel didn't move." "Daniel," I whispered. "Do you hear that?" He didn't answer. His face turned toward me, eyes closed, features peaceful, almost too peaceful. I slipped from the bed, the floor cold under my feet, and followed the sound down the hall. It grew clearer with each step. Wet gasps, pleading whispers. When I reached the basement door, the crying turned sharp, almost panicked. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob. The moment my fingers brushed the metal, the noise stopped. Silence crashed over the house. I stood there, breathing hard, listening for anything, a shuffle, a whisper, a breath, nothing, only my heartbeat. Frantic in the dark, behind me, Daniel's voice startled me. "Emma!" He was at the end of the hall, his silhouette calm, almost casual. "What are you doing up?" "I heard someone crying," I said. "Downstairs." "Didn't you hear it?" He frowned, stepping closer. "You've been dreaming again." "I wasn't dreaming." "Emma." He reached out, resting his hand on my shoulder. His touch was warm, gentle, but something in it felt like restraint. "You're tired. You need to stop letting the house get to you." He guided me back to bed, his tone soothing, almost rehearsed. I lay awake long after he drifted off, staring into the dark. Somewhere below us, the pipes groaned. Or maybe they whispered. I couldn't tell anymore. But by dawn, one thing was clear. The house wasn't the only one keeping secrets. After that night, sleep became a fragile thing. Every creak sounded like a voice. Every whisper of wind felt deliberate. I started keeping my phone beside the bed, its recorder open, waiting. Daniel thought I was getting better. He left for work humming again the way he used to. But as soon as the door closed, I pressed record. For hours, the house breathed around me. Pipes moaned, the fridge clicked, rain tapped the windows. Then, somewhere near the basement, a soft sound rose above it all, like someone trying not to be heard. When I listened to the playback, my heart froze. Beneath the static was a woman's voice, faint but desperate. "Help me, please." I replayed it again and again until I could no longer convince myself it was the plumbing. My hands shook as I copied the file to my computer. That's when I heard the front door open. Daniel was home early. He called my name, voice gentle but searching. I minimized the window, but his footsteps were already behind me. "What are you listening to?" "Nothing," I said too quickly. He reached past me and clicked play. The voice filled the room, faint, trembling, undeniable. Daniel's hand froze on the mouse. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he turned to me, his eyes darker than I'd ever seen them. "Why would you do this, Emma?" His voice was calm, too calm. "You're letting this house get inside your head." "That's not the house," I whispered. "That was someone." He slammed the laptop shut. The sound made me flinch. Silence hung between us, thick and electric. Then just as suddenly, his anger vanished. He sighed, took my hand, kissed my forehead. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "I shouldn't have raised my voice. There are things you don't understand about me. About this place." I wanted to ask what he meant, but the softness in his tone terrified me more than the anger had. That night I deleted the recording, or pretended to. But before I did, I sent a copy to my phone and hid it under my pillow, because whatever lived in these walls had a voice, and I wasn't sure if Daniel was trying to silence it or protect it. The next morning, Daniel was unusually attentive. He made breakfast, kissed my shoulder, asked how I'd slept. His tenderness felt like a cover, too smooth, too practiced. I answered in quiet monosyllables, my mind still echoing with that pleading voice from the recording. Just as I started to believe the day might pass in silence, there was a knock at the door. Daniel stiffened before even opening it. A man in a tan coat stood on the porch, rain dripping from his hat. "Mrs. Wren?" he asked politely. "Detective Callan. I'm following up on an old case. May I have a word?" Daniel appeared beside me instantly, smiling with that calm charm he carried like armor. "Of course, Detective. What's this about?" Colin's gaze lingered on Daniel a beat too long. "A woman named Lena Graves. She went missing about 7 years ago. Lived near here before the area was redeveloped. We're revisiting her case." The air seemed to leave the room. I caught Daniel's knuckles whitening around the back of the chair. "I don't think we can help you," he said lightly. "We moved here only a few years ago." But Callan didn't look away. His eyes narrowed slightly, studying Daniel's face with a strange recognition. "You look familiar," he said quietly. Daniel's smile didn't falter. "I get that a lot." The conversation lasted only minutes, but when the door finally closed, Daniel leaned against it for a moment, breathing slow and deliberate. "Why was he asking about her?" I said softly. He looked at me then, eyes unreadable. "People go missing all the time, Emma. You shouldn't let strangers fill your head." That night, the mask slipped. One moment, Daniel was affectionate, pressing his lips against my hair, whispering that he loved me more than anything. The next, his tone turned cold, distant. "You shouldn't have spoken so much to him," he said. "You don't know what stories people like that can make up." I lay in bed long after he'd fallen asleep, staring at the shadows stretching across the wall, because for the first time, I realized something chilling. Detective Callan hadn't only recognized Daniel. He'd remembered him. After the detective's visit, the house no longer felt like mine. Every step echoed too loud. Every silence waited too long. I packed a small bag one morning, heart racing, telling myself I'd just go to Claire's for a few days. I needed air, distance, to think clearly, but Daniel was waiting by the door before I could reach it. Going somewhere? His tone was mild, almost amused. I just need some space, I said carefully. He smiled, but his eyes didn't follow. Emma, you've been unwell. You don't even realize it, do you? Unwell. The word felt like a trap, soft and padded. I'm not. You've been hearing things, imagining people under our house. You need rest, not running away. When I reached for my phone, it wasn't in my bag. I checked the counter, the couch, the nightstand. Gone. Daniel watched me calmly. I took it. You've been sending strange messages to people, saying things that aren't true. What messages? He didn't answer. He just walked over, brushed a strand of hair from my face, and said softly, "You belong here." That evening, he cooked my favorite meal, mushroom risotto, the one he'd made the night he proposed. The smell filled the kitchen, rich and warm, masking the faint metallic tang that had crept back through the air. "See?" he said, placing the plate before me. "Just us, like before." I stared at the food. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I love you," he said, smiling too gently. "Because I can't lose you too." The word slipped out of him like a secret he hadn't meant to share. When I finally managed to eat, my hands trembled so badly the fork clinked against the plate. Daniel reached across the table, steadying it. His fingers lingered. "Don't make me protect you from yourself," he whispered. That night I lay awake, eyes open in the dark, the taste of salt and fear still on my tongue. Somewhere beneath us the pipes groaned again. Only this time the sound didn't come from the basement. It came from inside the walls. The storm came suddenly, thunder cracking like the earth itself had split open. Rain slammed against the windows, wind howling through the vents. The lights flickered twice before going out completely, plunging the house into a heavy, suffocating dark. Daniel wasn't home. He'd gone out earlier, saying he needed air. For the first time in weeks, I was alone. I lit a candle and tried to stay calm, but the smell returned. Stronger, thicker. It seeped from the floorboards, crawling up the walls. I covered my mouth, gagging. Something in me snapped. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I needed to see. The basement key hung on Daniel's ring, but weeks ago, I'd stolen one of his duplicates. My fingers trembled as I unlocked the door. The hinges groaned like they hadn't moved in years. The air that rushed out was cold and wet, thick with decay. My flashlight flickered to life, its weak beam slicing through the dark. The smell hit harder as I stepped down the creaking stairs, metallic, sweet, rotting. At the bottom, puddles glistened where the storm had leaked through the cracks. The walls were bare concrete, but something about them pulsed faintly, as if the house itself were breathing. I moved slowly, scanning the floor. That's when I saw it, an uneven patch near the far corner where the cement looked recently disturbed. My heart pounded as I knelt down, pushing at the soft edge. The concrete crumbled beneath my fingers, revealing something wrapped in torn plastic and lace. My breath caught, the faint shimmer of white fabric. A veil, I peeled it back with shaking hands. Beneath it were bones, fragile, yellowed, curled together as if still trying to hide. And around what had once been a wrist was a small, rusted tag. I wiped away the grime until the letters came into focus. Lena Graves. For a moment, the world tilted. I stumbled back, gasping, the flashlight clattering to the ground. The beam rolled, catching on something else. A single gold ring still resting on the skeleton's finger. The same pattern as mine, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I wanted to run, to scream. But all I could do was stare at the veil, at the bones, at the faint echo of a woman's plea, "Help me." And just as the storm thundered above, I heard another sound behind me, footsteps on the stairs. The footsteps stopped halfway down the stairs. The flashlight beam trembled in my hand as Daniel's voice drifted through the dark, low, steady, heartbreakingly calm. "Emma," he said softly, "I told you not to come down here." I couldn't move. The light caught his face as he descended, half in shadow, half in the trembling gold of the candle he carried. His eyes glowed with something between sorrow and devotion. He reached the floor, looked at the broken patch of concrete, and sighed. "You weren't supposed to see her like this," my voice cracked. "You killed her. Daniel set the candle on the ground beside the remains and sank to his knees. "No," he whispered. "I freed her. She betrayed me, Emma. She made me someone I didn't recognize." He brushed his fingers across the edge of the veil almost tenderly. "I loved her once, but she wanted to leave. I couldn't let her destroy everything I built." The candlelight flickered, casting moving shadows on the walls. His expression softened as he turned to me. "You're different. You make me better. I thought if I could keep this house alive, keep her here, maybe what I did could mean something. Maybe love could survive it." My knees gave out. "You buried her here." He nodded slowly, as if it were the most natural truth in the world. "Where else would she go? She belonged to this house, to me. Just like you do." I tried to back away, but he caught my wrist, his touch gentle, possessive. "Don't look at me like that," he said. "I never wanted to hurt you. You made me better. She made me worse. Daniel, please, shh." He pressed a finger to my lips. "We can start over. You and me, no more secrets." The storm above roared louder, shaking the floorboards. The candle sputtered, nearly dying, before flaring again. Its flame reflected in his eyes, bright and wild. Somewhere above us, the walls creaked, whispering back his words. And in that moment, I realized he didn't see me as his wife anymore. He saw me as his second chance. After that night in the basement, something inside me fractured. Quietly, cleanly. I stopped fighting him, stopped questioning. When Daniel woke the next morning, I was already in the kitchen making breakfast. My voice light, my smile practiced. He studied me for a long time before sitting down. "You're calm," he said cautiously. "I understand now," I replied, placing his coffee before him. "Love makes us do strange things." The tension in his shoulders eased. He reached for my hand across the table. "I knew you'd see it." For the next 3 days, I lived as his perfect wife, laughing at his jokes, leaning against his shoulder, pretending I didn't flinch when he touched me. Every word, every gesture was part of the performance. I had learned his language of control, and now I was speaking it back to him. But when he left the house to run errands, I searched. I found the detective's card still tucked inside my drawer, the edges worn from where I'd hidden it weeks before. My hands trembled as I dialed. "Detective Callan," came the familiar voice. "It's Emma Wren," I whispered. "You were right to come. He's not who he says he is." The detective told me to stay calm, to keep him distracted. They were close. That evening I cooked dinner, his favorite wine simmering on the stove beside 2 empty glasses. Daniel walked in humming, the picture of domestic contentment. "You've been different lately," he said, sitting down. "I just realized you were right," I said, pouring the wine. "Some things are better kept between us." He smiled, relief softening his features. I watched him lift the glass, his eyes on me. As he drank, I leaned forward, voice low and steady. "I understand you now," I whispered. He blinked, confused, then smiled faintly, that same calm smile he'd worn when he buried his first wife. Outside, I heard distant sirens threading through the rain. By the time the glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor, I was already standing, watching. My voice trembled, not from guilt but release. "Love makes us do strange things," I said again, and this time, I meant it. Red and blue lights painted the house in rhythmic flashes and like a heartbeat refusing to die. The front door hung open, rain dripping from its hinges. Officers moved quietly through the living room, their boots echoing against the hardwood. Daniel sat motionless in his chair, his head tilted to one side, the half-empty wine glass still trembling faintly in his slack hand. The faint scent of almonds clung to the air, bitter, unmistakable. Detective Callan stood over him, jaw tight. "He looks peaceful," one officer murmured. Colin didn't answer. His gaze had already drifted downward, to the basement door, slightly ajar. He descended carefully, flashlight beams slicing through the dim. The smell hit first, not death, but damp concrete and memory. Then the words came into view, scrawled in jagged handwriting across the far wall, black against the pale plaster. "He made me believe in love, and that's how he killed me." For a long time, no one spoke. The silence hummed like something alive. Colin traced the letters with his light, noticing the way they curved. Not angry, not frantic, but sorrowful. "Sir," an officer called softly from the stairs. We found her car at the end of the road. Engine's still warm. She's gone. Callan nodded slowly, the corners of his mouth tightening, not in surprise but understanding. He looked again at the words, at the faint indentation where Emma's hand must have pressed against the wall. A hiss rose suddenly from the far corner, the basement pipes, expanding with the change in temperature. But to Callan it almost sounded like a voice, a whisper, a breath. He turned off his flashlight. The darkness held him for a moment, heavy and patient. Then he spoke quietly, to no one in particular. Love makes us do strange things. When he climbed back upstairs, the storm had eased. Daniel's body looked almost peaceful now, like a man dreaming of devotion. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, carrying with it a soft, unending murmur, and beneath the floorboards, the pipes whispered on, as if the house itself remembered what love had done.